Reinventing your career is one of those things that can feel so exciting and be something that you really that you want so much, and yet it feels so overwhelming and so daunting at the same time. So in today's episode, we're going to take that big picture and break it down into smaller steps. I'm going to let you know exactly what it is that you need to do at each phase and the common stumbling blocks to watch out for, so that you know exactly how to approach making this shift that you want in your career, so that in 6 months' time, it looks completely different. Let's get into it. Hey, I'm Kiran, your coach, career strategist, and host of The Possibility Pattern, where we combine neuroscience and career strategy to expand what's possible for the future of your work. The tricky thing though, which is what you might be feeling, is that as soon as you've decided that, okay, something has to change, we then start thinking about, okay, wait, but what? Like, what is that going to be? What is that going to look like? And not knowing exactly what that change is going to look like can feel so overwhelming. It can feel so daunting. And this is why so many of us start to feel lost and just feel like, I don't even know what my options are. I don't even know what I would do. Deciding that you want something to change can be very confusing, let alone that if you start asking friends or family or anything like that, everybody and their auntie has some opinion about what it is that you should be doing. And what I find is that most of my coaching clients, when they come to me, are in this kind of swirl of confusion of just feeling like, I don't even know, I just have no idea what it is that I might want to do next, or feeling like I just feel so torn between these different paths and these different options, especially when they can feel so different. And the reason why is because so many of us can get so caught up just in our day to day. We're so busy trying to just like get through the day, get through the week, like rest a little, have a little bit of fun on the weekend, and you're straight back into it the next week. Like the overwhelm of the day to day can be so relentless that it's just so hard to be able to take a step back and think about the bigger picture, which means that for many people, when they get to this point, it's been a while since they actually did think about the bigger picture. So many of us just got onto a path and have just been plodding along. Have just been plodding along and just been like putting one foot in front of the other, and haven't taken a moment to look up and be like, oh, wait, do I still want to be on this path? And what path do I actually want to be on so that I can then choose the other path? So the very first phase of your career reinvention has to be a look up and sense check. So let's reorient ourselves and just figure out who we are in this moment, how we've changed, and figure out exactly what it is that we want. It's like recently I went for a run, and I was at a run club, and they had told us when you reach a certain mark, you should turn back and come back. And I just got lost in my head, and I just was running and running and running. And then at some point I realized, wait a minute, everybody else is gone and I've way past the mark, and I'm looking around like, where am I? I'm lost in the middle of nowhere, don't even know where I'm going. And so I had to try and reorient myself and then figure out which direction that I needed to go in. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the first phase, which is explore. This is all about exploration. The most important thing for us to consider as we go into exploration is taking the approach or the mindset that there's no right answer. We're not trying to figure out like, what is the right decision for us to make next? What is the right path for us to make next? When you put so much pressure on there being one right answer, that there's only one next step that you can take, that creates a lot of pressure and creates a sense of threat to our nervous system, because then our nervous system feels like there's only one safe path. And that is not true. In order for our nervous systems to feel safe with exploring, then we have to remind it that actually there's a lot of different ways that this could go. There are so many possibilities that are available to me. All I have to do right now is to be able to sort of lay them out on the table. And then we'll figure out afterwards what it is that we're going to do. We'll come to that. The first part is just, okay, let's get those options on the table. And how we generate those options to sort of like put on the table comes from two places. The first one is our strengths. And this is because we want to understand what is our most advantageous positioning with whatever it is that we do going forwards. I've talked about this in a lot of other episodes, but the key thing here is that you are most likely to be successful doing the things that you are very good at, but also are very energizing for you, which, as we've talked about before, is the true definition of your strengths. Right? Your strengths are things that you are good at and also are energized by. It sounds so obvious, but actually most people are not doing this. And the reason why you're more likely to be successful doing those things is because not only are you obviously good at those things, you're better than average at those things, already gives you an edge. But because you are energized and motivated to do those things, you are more likely to do them. You're more likely to keep wanting to do them. You're more likely to do more of it. And so it gives you like a higher chance of success. Yeah. And so you might be thinking, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We should all be doing that. But the reality is that most people are not. And you'll probably find that you are not either. And especially if you are feeling dissatisfied and you're feeling stuck in your job or your career at the moment, then I would put money on the fact that it's because that you are not spending enough time in this area of your unique genius, your unique strengths. And that actually what usually happens is that if you're somebody who has already seen some success in your career, then I'm going to bet that it's because you're actually caught in the trap of excellence, which is where you are spending most of your time on things that you're good at and you're very good at, but that you find very draining and then that you find boring. But the reason why we get trapped in there is because we're very good at those things. We get validated for them, we get recognized for them, we get praised for them. And so people continuously ask us to do those things. What I'll tell you, I have not had a client yet where this has not been the issue. And also, a big part of that is because if you're a millennial, then a lot of us did not make our early career decisions based on our unique genius. We made them based on what we were told would allow us to succeed. And especially depending on your background, that may have been very specific criteria of what it was that you were allowed to pursue, like law or accounting or engineering. So it had nothing to do with our genius in the first place. And so for a lot of us, we are now in this place of trying to figure out, oh wait, what is my unique genius? Like, what is it that actually I do really want to pursue or feels like me? And that's what so many people say to me. It's what a lot of my clients say that they want is, I want to do something that feels like me, that it feels like it's playing to my strengths, and it feels like I'm doing something that feels like I was born to do, but I don't know what that thing is. And if you don't know yet, it's because you've been spending a lot of time, I'm going to bet, in your trap of excellence. And what we want to do is get you into your unique genius, because that is your best positioning. Especially now when we think about how everything is changing in the world of work, those stable career ladders are falling away anyways. So it's even more important for us to be able to know, oh, wait a minute. What is my differentiation? What is my best opportunity to be able to create a path for myself in the future of work? Okay, so that's the first thing that we want to do. And I have a worksheet template that walks you through exactly how to do this, which I'll put a link in the show notes for. And if you want feedback and help actually like figuring out more specifically what that is for you, then this is one of the exercises that we go through in my Repattern Career Lab. So once we have our unique positioning, like our unique differentiation figured out, we've clarified what that is, that gives a signal on what it is that we should be doing. So for example, doing this exercise helped me identify that coaching is in my unique genius, but what kind of coach depends on this next exercise that we're going to do. So our strengths kind of gives us the what, but we need to figure out the how, right? Because the how, it kind of tells you like what kinds of companies or what kinds of industries or that kind of stuff, right? Like where do you apply that strength? Where do you apply that genius, right? Because you could apply it anywhere. And so that's what we figure out in the next step, which is clarifying your values. Values are actually mental models. They're actually mindsets. They're a way that our brain uses to organize information, and not just organize information, but even filter information, right? So our brain is more likely to show us things that are aligned with our values compared to things that are not, because it is looking out for those things that match with who we are. And that's exactly the reason why our values can actually keep us stuck and hold us back, because one, we think about them as these like fixed things. We have to pick values and then, stick with them for the rest of my life. But your values actually change so much more than we think over your life, because maybe you learn something new and that makes you realize, actually, you know what, I want to update that value. I don't believe the same things that I used to believe in the past. And so my values have changed. They can also change because of the season that you're in. Like your brain is literally using your values every single day to organize and structure your life. And ultimately what your values tell your brain is that this is what matters to me. This is what's important to me. That's why we call them values, right? Like what's valuable to me. And so your brain organizes your life based on what you've said matters. And what matters to us and is important to us and what's valuable to us changes over time depending on the season that you're in. So it's important to be kind of checking in regularly over your life, like, oh, what's actually important to me now? What's important to me in this year ahead, this next chapter, in these few years? Specifically when it comes to your career, I guarantee you that what matters to you in your career now and moving forwards is different from a few years ago or even a year ago. Absolutely from when you started your career, and definitely from a few years ago. The other thing that trips people up with values is that a lot of people are living and moving and organizing their life around values that they are not aware of. You may have never even thought about your values, or you may think that you're living from certain values and you say certain things are important to you. But in reality, the values that your brain is using to structure your life is very different. And this is something that happens if you never interrogate your values at all, because most of us absorb our values from when we're kids. So we absorb our values from our families and our early childhood experiences, our early environments. So you would have picked up values from school, from your past experiences. And remember, we always talk about how your brain is always predicting your future based on your past. And these are subconscious, right? Like your brain is just doing this whether you're paying attention or not. So these are the two big patterns that I notice come up when I'm working with people on their values. One is that their values have changed, and so they need to update those values for the next season. So like what they want in their career moving forwards is different from the past, and therefore we need to choose different values. And then the other thing that I see is that the values that people think that they have are actually completely different to what's actually running their life. For example, I was working with a client who'd become a parent and was sort of getting back into work after maternity leave. And so as we were talking about her values, she could see, oh, you know what? I used to really value variety. So kind of like fast-paced environments, which were very volatile, things were like, or chaos. She kind of valued chaos. She thrived on that. Since she'd become a parent, she actually was like, that, you know, what's most important to me right now in the next chapter of my career is actually stability. I want everything with work to be chill because actually at home, things are chaos. And so that was an intentional choice. Like, oh, okay, I'm choosing a new set of values when it comes to my career moving forwards based on the season of life that I'm in. And so this kind of shows like why being really clear on what your values have been and what they are right now and sort of how you're organizing your life right now is so important so that you can also decide, is that what I want for my career moving forwards? And again, I'll tell you, I've never had a client who has been feeling dissatisfied and like stuck in their career who, when we did this values exercise, didn't need to update at least one of their values. And so essentially these two things together, your positioning and your values, becomes the blueprint for all of your options moving forwards, because you want the options that you're considering to be aligned with your unique genius and your values. And again, there's a worksheet for this one too, which I'll pop the link in the show notes for as well. And if you're in the Repattern Career Lab, then this is something that I can help you to clarify what this is for you moving forwards, because it's important that these things are real and grounded in how your brain is actually working and making your decisions, and not just words that sound nice. Like often people will just choose values that sound nice. Like my value is ease or peace. That's not encoded in your brain. That's not what your brain's doing. You may say that, it sounds nice. Who doesn't want that? But we need to be working with what's actually working in your brain, because that's what's creating your life. So then the final thing that we do in the explore phase is to map out your options. This is kind of inspired by like a design thinking approach to career. And I always like to map out 3 different options, because I think what gets a lot of people stuck is trying to just think about one option, like what's my best next step? And the reality is that that's not how life works. And that's definitely not the way that the world of work is going. Even just from an exploration perspective, like we are so multifaceted, it's impossible to expect that there could only be one way that things go. So what I always do with clients and with myself is to map out 3 very different options. Okay, so the first one is, what would it look like if you continue doing what it is that you're doing right now? So like, let's play out that path. And then the second option is, what would it look like if the current path that you're on doesn't exist and you had to use your strengths in a completely different way to do something completely different? And the third thing is what I call your Delulu dream. What is the thing that is that secret dream inside that you probably haven't told anyone and feels so crazy, feels so disruptive, but is the answer to the question that if you won the lottery and didn't have to work for money, what is it that you would do? My answer to this was writing, that I would just be a writer and I would write a book. That's what I would do. This part is all about just thinking as widely and as broadly as we can. I call this phase possibility mapping, and I have a worksheet for this as well, which you'll find in the show notes. But what I find so interesting about this exercise whenever I do it with people is that because we're not thinking about the one right answer, so many different things, the spectrum of things that comes up is fascinating. But what always happens is that by opening your mind to even just consider other options from a safety perspective of like, this is just a thought experiment. It creates a sense of clarity so fast because you're able to react to what's written down. And what always happens is that people see how they could potentially work together. So often people will say, you know what, I definitely can see that I don't want to do number two, but I think I would love to do number one now and work towards number three. Or maybe I could combine number two and three together to create something else. So this generates so much clarity and sense of direction just from allowing yourself to think more broadly. This exercise essentially forces your brain to think more expansively than it usually is, because your brain is usually just giving you options based on what you've done in the past. And so this kind of like nudges and encourages your brain to think a little bit more creatively about what's possible for you. So once we have all the options laid out, then we move into the next phase, which is all about making some smart and strategic decisions. So once we've mapped out our options, we get to the decide phase. And the headline that we want to remember when it comes to getting to the point to make a decision is that, again, we don't want to be trying to force ourselves into thinking that there is a right decision. There's no such thing as the perfect decision. What we want to be making instead is making sure that any decision that we make is a smart and strategic decision as opposed to a right decision. And so where we want to end up at the end of the decide phase is having a clear strategy, a clear sense of exactly what it is that we're working towards. So we have our sense of direction, and this part is essentially creating the plan. What is our strategy for how we're going to approach this? And I always recommend people to have a couple of strategies in play at the same time. So you need to have your deliberate strategy, which is the one that you are focused on right now. In whatever it is that I'm doing right now, what is my primary goal? What am I working towards? So that's my deliberate strategy. And then you want to have your emergent strategy. What is the thing that I'm building my way towards? And then the final strategy is your disruptive strategy. So for example, for me, I really want to set up a retreat house. And so if I won the lottery, I'd buy like an old hotel or villa or something, and I would renovate it, and I would go and just write there. I would turn it into like a creative healing type of retreat for people. That's how you're going to know that I've won the lottery, because I won't be telling anybody, is that I suddenly disappear and then you just find me in this retreat center. Okay. So that's my disruptive strategy. And so you can kind of think about this as well as, what is my short-term, medium-term, and long-term career strategy that I'm kind of like thinking about at the moment. And it's not to say that these things won't change, but it's just that right now, this is how you see your broader career strategy. And this also helps you to give a sense of like how they lead together, right? How does my short-term strategy ladder up to my long-term strategy, and to my medium-term strategy, and to my long-term strategy, so that the experiences that you're gathering all sort of like build on each other. You can also see like it gives you a sense of sequence. Like, what do I focus on right now, but also how is what I'm focusing on right now helping what it is that I want to move towards, which is ultimately what strategic decisions are about, right? Like, we want to make sure that what we are deciding right now is aligned to the broader, bigger picture of what it is that we're trying to do in our careers. Again, not to say that you have your right answers, that may change, but it's just how you're thinking about it right now. But in order for us to decide what is our deliberate strategy and our emergent strategy, we need to take those options, which are sort of our hypothesis that we clarified in the explore phase, and start testing them. Start designing some experiments that help us to gather information and evidence about what it is that we should be prioritizing, to give us enough evidence to be able to commit and say, okay, this is my strategy. This is what I want to focus on. And this is so important because when it comes to career decisions, so many people are making reactive decisions that are not aligned to their bigger picture, and where the reality doesn't meet their expectations ahead of time. So you see so many people who, say, oh, I got my dream job and then I was miserable and I hated it. But how did you know it was your dream job? Was it a dream or a fantasy? And so the experiments help us to make sure that the decisions we make are not fantasies, that they're dreams. And the way that we do that is by testing them. So, for example, I had a client who was working in finance and wanted to move into tech, and thought she might be a good fit for partnerships roles. And she had no experience whatsoever in tech. So, for example, experiments for her were like speaking to people who work in tech, speaking to people who work in partnerships roles, going to tech events, understanding more about the industry, and starting to develop a point of view in terms of even the kinds of products that she was more drawn to, and also understanding the future of where things are going. Or, for example, I had another client who thought that she might want to set up a fashion business. So instead of just deciding, okay, I'm going to start a fashion business and like setting up the company and just like starting the business, we came up with an experiment that she could run a pilot and do a pop up event that would kind of give her a proof of concept, like would help her test. Not only did she actually enjoy it, but also, is there market demand? Do people actually want this and in this model? And again, kind of coming back to that design thinking, this is about prototyping, right? How can you prototype the decisions before you make them? And that's what we do in the experiment phase. This is exactly what I did before I started working full time as a coach. I started doing it on the side while I still had a 9 to 5. And that was the whole idea, to test, do I even like this? So this helps us make sure that any decisions we make are strategic and aligned to what we're best at, to our values, and where it is that we're trying to go. But it also is strategic from the perspective of how our nervous system works. The more exposure you're able to give yourself when it comes to the decision you're trying to make, the less scary it's going to feel, because you are reducing that uncertainty, right? Uncertainty is kryptonite to our brain, or it's the thing it hates the most. And it is constantly, at any given moment, always optimizing to reduce uncertainty, which is why it's a prediction machine. It is trying to make a best guess at any given time of what the future might be like. The more uncertainty that's attached to a decision, the scarier it feels, which is why so many of us get stuck or get into analysis paralysis when it comes to making a decision to make a change, because there is so much uncertainty attached to it. There's no guarantee of what the outcome will be. So the more we can reduce that uncertainty by giving our brain some evidence, the more our nervous system is going to feel able to even make that decision in the first place. This shows up especially where we are choosing between different options. So, for example, the age old, should I stay or should I leave? Without approaching it in a strategic way, if we just left ourselves and our nervous system to its own devices, our nervous system is going to try and pull us to the most familiar option, which could be staying, but it could also be leaving, in the sense that maybe the leaving is you're leaving to a more familiar option. But what your nervous system wants you to do from the perspective of safety isn't necessarily what's best for you or most strategic for you in terms of your growth and your career and your evolution and your learning, right? And that's why being strategic about how you make strategic decisions is really important. I know that's a bit meta, but okay, so to recap, so once you've mapped out your aligned options from phase one, and then you've tested, you've experimented, you've got enough evidence for you to be able to decide what is your deliberate and emerging and disruptive strategy going to be, that's when we move into the final phase, which is the building phase. It's my favorite phase. This is the phase where we are now taking action towards these strategies. This is the putting in the reps phase, and where we start building momentum so that we can actually create and bring these strategies to life. So let's talk about it. So now that we've got to the build phase, this is actually my favorite phase, because this is where the rewiring and the repatterning is actually happening. This is where we are becoming the person that we want to be. The first two phases are all about clarifying and deciding who it is that we want to become. But now in the build phase, this is where we're actually doing it. We're actually becoming that person. And it's so exciting. There's so much possibility in that. And just seeing people stepping into this next version of themselves is just so exhilarating for me. I absolutely love it. But it's also the hardest phase, because it is where things get uncomfortable. Remember, in the wild, discomfort, like uncomfortable zone, could equal death, right? So that's what we have to remember. This is when our nervous system starts to freak out a little bit, when we're doing new things, we're trying new things and trying to get ourselves to do new things. Some of those old patterns start coming up, and some of the old wiring that we have is going to be fighting back, because it wants us to return to the familiar, to the efficiency. And that's why in my possibility pattern, this is the phase that I call intimidated, where you are now clear about what it is that you want to do and what you're moving towards, but you are now just, it's bringing up a lot of fear and anxiety for you. And so I always say that the only goal for this phase is putting in the reps, because that's what builds momentum and builds that consistency. And the way that we do that is by breaking things down into small steps and just focusing on taking the next rep, which is taking the next smallest step. And so the state that we need to be in to take the next smallest step is courageous, which is why I call the next stage courageous. Courageous is where you're feeling the fear and doing it anyway, right? But the way that you are able to tap into courageous to take that next smallest step is through nervous system regulation. So you have to remind your nervous system that taking the next step is safe. And that's why we don't think about the big thing. We know what the big thing is because we've decided what the big thing is. But when it comes to trying to get ourselves to take action, we just tell our nervous system, babe, just do this next bit. And the more that you do that, the more you're able to build momentum towards the thing that you want, but also the more comfortable that you get. Like your nervous system does start to adapt because of neuroplasticity. So it starts to adapt, you start to get used to it. And those next smaller steps start to feel easier and easier. They can start getting bigger and bigger. You build up your tolerance over time until it starts to feel more normal. And the things that used to feel really nerve-wracking in the beginning now feel really normal. I remember I used to get so anxious when I would post on social media, like for my work. Like literally before, I used to have to do some breath work before I would press post on Instagram. I just really hated it. And I used to have a much bigger fear of being seen. This is what I've been repatterning, is my fear of being seen. And now it's nothing. I press post like, you know what? It's no big deal. Just give yourself some grace, because this really is about rewiring neural pathways. And that takes time. It takes repetition, and repetition is what builds the consistency. So rather than expecting yourself to be consistent upfront, expect inconsistency and plan for it. And this is why I designed the Career Lab to be 6 months, because really the first 2 phases of explore and decide take probably a month or 2. But really, like, the hardest part and the part that takes the longest time is this. It's the putting in the reps, it's the building momentum. And that's where having a container for the nervous system regulation helps to regulate you, keeps you accountable, makes sure that you are showing up for your next rep. And that's what we do. So basically, on Fridays, we get together for an hour in what I call our Future Fridays co-working club. And we use that time to put in our next rep. So whether that's, sending a job application, or it is working on your creative project, or working on your portfolio, maybe it's posting your content. Whatever it is, we want to be making sure that we're dedicating time at least weekly to building out that future, which is why I call it Future Fridays. You can design things in your own life that can help you to do this. So can you get together with another friend where you do that? How can you give yourself some structure to make sure that you are consistently doing that? Maybe it's turning this into a routine. Like I had a client who every Sunday would go to a particular coffee shop and would spend a couple of hours every Sunday morning working on building out his portfolio for what it is he wanted to move into next. So you can design your own structures, but if you want to be able to just show up and have the structure created for you, then you are more than welcome to come and join us in Repattern. If you need support thinking through and problem solving your decisions as well, then on Fridays we have a decision lab as well, where you can come and I can help problem solve anything that you're coming up against in your exploration phase and in your decision phase. But it's created in such a way to be able to support you through all 3 of these phases: explore, decide, and build. And all of these 3 phases you can do without having to quit your job first. And that's why I say, literally just commit to a ritual of 1 or 2 hours a week for the next 6 months. I promise you your career is going to look different. Just put it in your calendar right now. 1 hour a week. And over the next 6 months, work through these 3 phases. The worksheets are in the links. And I guarantee you that you and your career are going to look and feel and be different in 6 months' time. And like I said, if you want to come and do that with me and with the rest of us in the Career Lab, then you're more than welcome to join us. We would love to have you there. It's always so helpful for everybody else to be with other people who are on the same journey. So there we have it. Good luck with your reinvention. And let me know if you have any questions. Please do reach out and let me know on socials how it's going, if you need any help, and how things are evolving for you. All right, my loves, enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you next week.